When I discovered this beautiful new color by Bernat blanket yarn, I knew I had to make myself something to get ready for the cool weather. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this easy weekend chunky blanket using a crochet stitch that looks a lot like knit. This stitch is pretty easy to do. We're just working with single crochets, but if you decide it's a bit too tricky, I'll show you a more beginner-friendly option later in the video. But be sure to watch the entire video because everything else is just the same except for where you'll be placing your hook to form your stitches. The blanket that you see here measures roughly 4 by 5 foot and was made with a 12mm hook. The required hook size for this yarn is a lot smaller, but I found that the 12mm worked really well with the stitch that we're using today and helped the blanket to grow faster. For this project, I bought 4 balls of yarn, but only ended up using 3 1/4 to 3 1/2 of that. So you can actually go a lot bigger with the 4 balls of yarn. With this stitch, you can make a big blanket, so it goes a long way. I'm going to create a gauge swatch and I'll put the details in the description box below the video. That way you can use that to resize the blanket to the size that you want. For this project, we're just working with single crochets, but we're going to be doing 2 different things that are going to give that knit style effect to the stitch. The first thing is we're going to create our chain based on the length of the blanket that you want to make. Typically we start it with the width, but for this we want to start with the length. So that would be the measurement going from your head to your feet. Adding a slip knot to my hook. So this is super easy. You don't have to worry about any kind of multiples. You're just going to chain up to the length that you want to make. For example, I started with a chain of 70 plus 1 for my turning chain. One little tip here as you're making your chain, there isn't a lot of stretch doing it this way, so whatever length you want it to be, make sure that that chain reaches that measurement. I would recommend that you work this a little bit more loosely than you normally would. If you have a hook that is a larger size than the one you're going to be using, that's great. I don't, so I'm just trying to be very loose with my chains as I work. One little tip here with this yarn, it's really thick, so you really don't even need to tension it by wrapping it through your fingers. I found that that actually slowed me down. Just pinching your yarn between your forefinger and middle finger works really well with this yarn. Next, working into the second chain from the hook, 1, 2, create a single crochet in each chain across. And now here's the second thing that is going to give that effect to your stitch that gives it more of a knit look. And that's where we're placing the hook to create our single crochet stitches. So chain 1 and turn. Instead of doing our typical single crochet, working into the stitch and forming our single crochet, we're going to be working in front of the stitch in these horizontal bars right below that stitch. If you look at the single crochet, it has that kind of V appearance. We want to maintain that. That's what's going to give us that beautiful V or knit effect on the front of our blanket. The neat thing about this also is that it's reversible. You're going to get that effect on both sides. So this can be a little bit tricky at first, especially with this very first stitch. These ones are very easy to see, but the one on the side is sort of at an angle. And once you do your chain, sometimes it's hard to see. But it's this one right here. You want to be sure to go into that one for your very first single crochet. Yarn over, pull your yarn through, yarn over and pull through to create your single crochet. What I highly recommend for this project is using stitch markers. I used it for the entire blanket just so I didn't have to overthink on it. Made it very easy for me to find my very first stitch each time. So if you're ever in doubt, just look for the V on the top and then right below it you'll see the horizontal bar. For this stitch, you really want to work loosely. It's going to make it much easier for you to get into that front bar. There's my horizontal bar. Single crochet. Horizontal bar. You're just going to continue this all the way across. Again, working nice and loose. If you're working along and you lose track of where that horizontal bar is, just pull everything forward. Look for that top stitch and go right below, and there it is. When you come to the end, you'll have something that looks like this. You'll have your horizontal bar and the end of that row. Just work into that horizontal bar. If it looks like this and it looks like you need one more stitch, you don't. You are going to have like a ripple or ridged effect when you're finished with this project. And I'm going to show you how you can straighten that out if you don't like the look of that. This is where a stitch marker comes in so handy, and also really taking the time to count your stitches row after row. So when you've come to the end, chain 1 and turn. And here you can see that ribbing effect that's happening with that effect of the knit stitch. It's absolutely beautiful. For row 2, same thing. We're just going to be working into that horizontal bar in front of your single crochet stitch. The one on the side is a little tricky to see. It's not really horizontal. It's kind of at a diagonal. Go ahead and work into that. Create your single crochet and add a stitch marker into that very first single that you made. You will thank yourself for that later. Sometimes it can get a little bit confusing because you have another horizontal bar right next to it. You don't want to work into that. You want to work into the one that's right next to that single crochet stitch, right below it. And that's all there is to it. You're just going to do this row after row until you reach the width of the blanket that you want to make. Just keep going until you get to where it's going comfortably over your hips, and you'll be good to go. And if this feels a little bit confusing, like I said, I do have a simpler one at the end of the video, a simpler option to get that ribbing effect. But with practice, I really think you're going to get the hang of this, and it's so beautiful. Coming close to the end here. There's my stitch marker, and I see one more horizontal bar available. There's my last single crochet. There's my bar right under it. Chain 1 and turn. You'll have something that looks like this when you're finished. You'll have sort of a ribbing effect. Really pretty, but if you want to straighten that out, you certainly can. I straightened mine out. I added single crochets on the sides where it looked like this, not because I didn't like the look of it, but because I didn't make the blanket as long as I wanted. So I went ahead and put single crochets there so I can add a border later. So if you want to do the same thing, I recommend before you fasten off, go ahead and do one of the sides. Chain 1, and then I worked a single crochet into each of these rows. So a single crochet here, 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 here. So I did a chain 1, and just go in. I'm doing this very loosely again, just finding a place that looks pretty good. Back to the middle. Then I kind of go into the middle of that stitch, working my single crochets loosely. You can go around 2 bands of yarn. I like to just go around the 1. And then again, just into the meat of that stitch. And here for my very last one, instead of working in here, I'm going to go right near that slip knot to get into that corner. And that's done. Then I fasten off, and then I just repeat it on the other side. Fasten on in that corner there, adding a slip knot to my hook. It's a bit loosey-goosey there, but I'm just going to go into that corner with a standing single crochet. So pull your yarn through, create your single crochet like you normally would. I'm not going to bother with a chain one because that's the same as a single crochet right there, and then work right into that next stitch. And then just continue on with the same thing that I was doing on the other side, going into the middle area. Let's call that the knit stitch. Let's just go into that knit stitch, middle area, knit stitch. And you get the drill. If you like the look of the blanket, but it was a little bit tricky working into that horizontal bar, you can get a very similar look by working the back loop only with your single crochets. You're not going to have this V appearance on the front, but you are going to get this really pretty ribbing effect. So again, create your chain working to the length that you want your blanket to be. For example, I started with a chain of 70 plus 1 for your turning chain. So for me, that was 71. And then after that, create your single crochets in each chain across, starting with the second chain from the hook. 1, 2. Just like the beginning of the video for the other stitch. Chain 1 and turn. And now instead of working into that horizontal bar, you're just going to pull your stitch forward so that you can see the V's of your stitches. And now you're going to do the back loop only. So there's my chain 1, and here's my first stitch. I'm just going to go into the back loop only of that single crochet stitch and make my single crochet. Just pull the work forward so you can see the top of your single crochets, working into the back loop only, single crochet. And again, the same advice, work loosely for this. This is just going to make it way easier to work your hook into those stitches. When you reach the end, pretty easy to see that last stitch, but I would still recommend that you use stitch markers. Chain 1 and turn. There's my chain 1, there's my stitch, back loop only. This is going to give you that ridged effect or that ribbing effect. Just work the back loop only. Really, really lovely, and this one works up very quickly, so if you decide to go with this one, you could probably get this finished in a day. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you give this a try. I am madly in love with my blanket, and I can't wait to start using it. If you enjoy videos like this, the crochet in a day chunky blankets, I do have one that's very popular on the channel using a V-stitch. It works up very quickly. You only need 3 or 4 balls of yarn for that one as well, and you're going to get a really nice sized blanket. I'll go ahead and link to it here, and wish you a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.